Welcome to the Wellness Revolution Podcast, the radio show all about wellness in your mind, body, spirit, personal growth, sex, and relationships. Stay tuned for weekly interviews featuring guests that have achieved physical, mental, and spiritual health in their lives. If you'd like to have access to our entire back catalog, visit drveronica.com for instant access. And here is your host, Dr. Veronica.
This is Dr. Veronica, and you're listening to Wellness for the Real World, a show that gives you information about all the other stuff. And so you can go on the University of Google and find out about all the normal stuff in health and wellness. But on Wellness for the Real World, we're going to give you a different view, a complementary view, alternative views. And we're going to give you the stuff that really works, not just what the talking heads say, not just what is paid for by politicians and for politicians. We're going to tell you not just what's paid for by pharmaceutical companies and by companies that decide what you eat, but we're going to tell you all the truth because the truth shall set you free. I have with me Russell, and as you get to know us, you're going to know about our multiple talents. We're going to talk about some of our really out there left field talents that when I tell people about it, they think it's really cool. And Russell has one of these talents too. But before we get into that, hi, Russell, how are you?
Hello, I almost said hello, Russell. Hello, Veronica. I'm doing fine, thank you.
Well, I'm so happy that you're here.
Well, I am too.
I said, Russell, okay, I'm a medical intuitive, and people say, well, what is a medical intuitive? So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But Russell, and you might know this more, Russell has also been a medium among his other things. Now, Russell is a quite talented graphic artist, website designer, but he also sings and dances and acts and has been a meditation teacher. But one of the other pieces of his life that we haven't talked about a whole lot is that he's been a medium. So we're going to talk about that today just because people ask me a lot about what is a medical intuitive. Whenever I tell people what I do, there's like, oh my God, can you see things about me? Well, yes and no. But we're going to talk about psychic, mediumship, clairvoyant, claircognizant, all that type of stuff and what it has to do with your health. Is that okay with you, Russell?
That's okay with me, Veronica.
Okay, good.
I'm just the co-host, so I do what you say.
Thank you so much. I'm glad. See, I like my men to be obedient like this. So, as a medical intuitive, people say, well, what exactly does that mean? It's a really fancy way to say that I'm a psychic. And let's talk about how that plays into what I do and when I found out and all that type of stuff. So I realized about, let's say, 12, 14 years ago that I could see things and know things. I see visions like movies, images pop into my mind. And I started realizing that these are really accurate images. I would think something or know something, and it was not just a coincidence. And this became stronger and stronger over time, but I realized this is something we are all intuitive. It's mediated in part of our brain, actually, our temporal lobe, which also mediates spiritual experiences, is where our intuitive abilities reside. And so there is science behind this. And today is not the day I'm going to get into all the science. One day I will have some other guests on that can get all sciencey with you and we can talk about this. But I started realizing that I could see and know information about people. And I would know information about people and I didn't have to necessarily even be in their presence. And it became really super duper salient to me, super salient, when my husband and I had an export business and I was the face of that export business in the email marketing. And people overseas would start Googling who I was. They'd see my face and say, who's Dr. Veronica Anderson? Because, you know, it's in my email signature, even though it had nothing to do with medicine. And people will come to me and say, you're a doctor. Can I ask you a question? And when I say they would come to me, They would send me a text or a Skype message, and all of a sudden I realized that I knew exactly what was wrong with them. Before they asked me the question, I knew what was wrong with them. And I thought, hey, then they'd start to ask me questions and I'd start to kind of interview them. And when I say interview them, I'm talking about people I've never met and I would text with on WhatsApp or Viber or Skype or one of those other type things. Just, a text message on regular texting. And they would ask me questions and I would start asking and verify that the information or the diagnosis, I'll say, that I made was the correct diagnosis. Now, I didn't have verification, but what would happen after that is people would come to me because they wanted help with something that was ailing them from a physical perspective. Now, think about it. I'm thousands of miles away. So what could I possibly do? Well, those of us who understand energy and energetic fields understand that you can do something thousands of miles away because, time and space are an illusion. And so therefore, when people would ask me these questions, they'd open up their energy field to me and I would get download of information about what was going on in them. I'd actually can see things. Images would come across me. I have what's called claircognizance. It means I just know something. There's more intuitive senses besides clairvoyance. Now think about this. My strongest intuitive sense is clairvoyance, which means that I see very well. And my profession is that of an eye surgeon, my primary profession. Now, I don't do eye surgery anymore, but I do help people see clearly with their health and spiritually. And there's always a spiritual and emotional connection with your illnesses, injuries. Always, always, always. This is why you manifest illnesses the way you do. And so now that I understand this more and have studied it more and been mentored in it more to make it even stronger, it is my purpose to help other people understand how their emotional and their spiritual connects. And so when people would ask me, can you help me? Or can I ask you a question? After I'd figure out what was going on with them, I get the download on what was going on with them. Those of us in the intuitive fields say that we get the download. I would also get downloads as to what they should do about it. Mind, body, spirit, what they should do about it. So not just eat this, don't eat that, do this particular exercise. And when I say exercise, or do this spiritual exercise, here's what you have to do. I have a particular forgiveness exercise that I would like you to do. And I would just get a download and all of a sudden be counseling people about what they should do, which was not textbook. It wasn't necessary. Some of it would be textbook, but most of it wasn't textbook. And these are with people that I've never seen and met other than I've chatted with them a little bit online and they asked me for medical advice. I started doing readings on people. I would read somebody. I read this one gentleman who, I said, hey, can I just do a reading on you? He said, sure. I did a reading on him. But then also I could get information about people that were close to him. So I got information about his father and his mother, and I got some health information about his mother, about what was going on with her from a health perspective. And at the time that I told him this, it hadn't happened yet. He called me 3 days later and said, my mother's in the hospital and she has XYZ ABC. It was exactly what I said was going on with her. So I started realizing that my intuitive abilities were quite strong, but on the other side, I didn't want to talk about it here in the United States of America as a MD trained physician because we only talk about case-controlled, double-blind, retrospective studies, which we've all been fed the Kool-Aid, and we drank the Kool-Aid. For those of you who can look back in history and remember Jim Jones and how he Kool-Aided everybody, America has been Kool-Aided by a lot of the forces, the food industry, the pharmaceutical industry. And so as I realized I had these abilities and I was helping people across the world, I didn't want to help people here in the United States because I was afraid that my colleagues and just everybody around me would say, oh my God, she's crazy, she's whack, blah, 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 blah. And actually, a couple of my mentors, Jane Sanders, which you've heard on this show, another woman, Wendy Darling, she's a love expert. I'm going to have her on. You're going to love her. Wendy Darling, who was actually, these people were business coaches for me, who mentioned to me, listen, you have these abilities. You got to use them to help people. They can really help people. And so this is such a strong part of you. You have to use it. And so thus I announce myself as not just a medical doctor but a medical intuitive. And as a medical doctor at this point in time, I do only holistic coaching. I don't diagnose and write prescriptions at all. At this point in time, I feel that's a conflict of interest. I focus solely on how to get you well based on what's going on underlying your diagnosis. How about that? So that you can actually reverse and heal yourself. Your body was meant to heal, and you're not healing because first you have to get it in your mind that you can heal, because your mind and how you think changes your physiology. And so let me just take this a little bit further. You have 5 main emotions. There are 3 that are health harming and 2 that are health promoting or positive on your health. Okay, so the 3 emotions that hurt you, and you already are going to know this when I say it: fear, anger, sadness. Those are the 3 emotions that everything you feel that you want to call, let's give it a label right now, bad, fear, anger, sadness. Now, I don't like saying good or bad because it just is. You just feel the particular way. And so, but fear, anger, and sadness, which are lower on the vibrational scale, and we'll talk more about vibrations as we go along the show. The fear, anger, and sadness is what allows your body to be susceptible to any kind of illness or injury. And the fear, anger, and sadness, you call it stress. And so when you think, I'm stressed, you are experiencing fear, anger, or sadness. And I just get very detailed about fear, anger, and sadness and where it comes from, what's causing it, and how it's manifesting in your body as a medical intuitive. Now, let's talk about what helps you stay well. When you see people are well, invariably, they have figured out how to manifest the emotions of love and joy. Love and joy. And highest emotion, think about this, is wrapped up with love and joy in one, is gratitude. And so you might see people who've had major illnesses, and I know Russell has had some challenges, and he's actually quite remarkable. And if he wants to share some of that, he's usually open about sharing some of that. He can share some of that too, because it helps people to hear all of our journeys. But the love and joy and gratitude is what allows you to stay well. And you can make fear, anger, and sadness, let it go and bring it over to love and joy. And so as a medical intuitive, I help people see the links between their emotional and spiritual state and their physical state. Where is it? What's the problem? Why do you have that? And I don't need to know anything other than your first name, your last initial, your sex, and your age. That is all. And I don't need to talk to you or see you. You give me your first name, your last name, your age, and your sex. And I do a reading on you, a 14-point reading, and tell you, here's what's going on. Underlying. Now, medical intuitive readings, this is the medical disclaimer because there's more lawyers than people in this country. You know that. The medical disclaimer about medical intuitive readings are, it's not a medical diagnosis, medical treatment, or psychotherapy, and anything that you hear in a medical intuitive reading, you must check with your doctor, who, by the way, here's the other thing about their doctor. They're not going to know anything about this, okay? They're just not going to know. They're not going to have studied, and if it's not case-controlled, double-blind, retrospective study, they're not going to have anything to say about it, and a lot of them are going to say, why you listen to that crazy person? But those of you who are in the know likely have somebody like me on your team. And if you do, you will have realized that somebody who knows a little bit outside of the physical, outside of the drug studies, is probably one of the most valuable persons on your team. And so, I love now what I do. I loved when I was in a traditional practice, I loved my clients. I loved my patients. But I couldn't stand what I did. I just got to the point where I couldn't stand it because I saw sickness and disease all day, every day. And it didn't seem like anybody was trying to get well. It just seemed like people loved to stay in that victim mentality. But now I have people who seek me out and come to me because they want to figure out, how do I conquer this? How do I actually get better? And so I use my abilities, my intuitive abilities, to help guide people. Not just, there's the intuitive side, but then there's also the practical health coaching side, which I use holistic teaching, the standards of nutrition, which is very customized for a person, plus fitness, plus hormonal balancing, nervous system balancing, detoxification. I use herbs, homeopathics, all those pieces of information that I had to go after medical school and learn about, and which I've had quite a bit of training now in all these areas. So I blend. This is East meets West. I have the conventional background, so I understand exactly what you're talking about when you come and sit down with me or call me on the phone or Skype with me. But I also understand those other nuances that are there that do not exist in conventional Western medicine, but do exist in other types of medicine like Ayurvedic medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, because your energy system is you. It's of utmost importance. And so your spiritual state, your emotional state, if it's well, you can help get your body well. Now, that's what I do as a medical intuitive, but I want to talk to I'm basically, it's a fancy way of saying I'm a psychic that specializes in health issues. I'm also very strong in the area of love issues. I frequently get information about people's romantic lives in my readings. Quite interesting. It's something that comes in very strong, and maybe, I don't know why that is. I think everybody deserves to have wonderful love in their life all around. So it might be that because I focus that way, that the love information, the romantic information, whether it be positive or not so positive, it comes in strong to me when I do readings. So we have we have our physical senses like sight and hearing and taste, but we also have our intuitive senses, clairvoyance, clairsentience, which is a body sense. You feel something. Clairtaste, clair smell. So clairaudience. I don't know if did I say clairaudience. That's when you can hear things. And so sometimes, and all of us who are in the intuitive fields have ones that are more strong than others. But as we develop ones, they all become quite strong. So somebody will start talking to me, and all of a sudden I'll realize, something's hurting, and I feel this here or there in my body, and I know it's not me because my body's fine in a particular area. But when I'm doing a reading on that person or for that person, all of a sudden I'll get particular sensations. Now, having said that, Russell has been a medium, and now let me tell you how I know mediums are people who usually can communicate with people from beyond, people who have passed out of this physical life and are in another realm. And so, Russell, tell us about what a medium is and what you did when you were a medium.
Well, that's an interesting question. The kind of medium I was, or discovered that I was, is also called a channeler. If you ever read Shirley MacLaine's books, it's the kind of thing she was talking about, that she would go to mediums to experience. I started out quite by accident. I first was taught to meditate, age 20, 21, and found it very useful, and still do. I've done it all these years with periods of time off, but then eventually I always come back to it and find more, find a way to return to myself, so to speak. When I discovered channeling, it was in the 80s, right around that Shirley MacLaine era, and I became involved with a group of maybe 6 to 8 people who would meet every Tuesday night, I believe, in the apartment of a medium who was a beautiful young woman, an actress. Her name was Elisa. I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying that. And we would meet in her tiny little apartment on Barrow Street in Greenwich Village. And there would be candles, and we would sit in a circle of chairs. And she would sit, and she would chit-chat with us and so on. And then at a certain point, we would say a little meditation together, and she would loosen her shoulders and so on and take a few deep breaths. And then within a minute or so, this entity would come into her. Typically it was Mary, an English woman with a great deal of wisdom and energy. Sometimes it was Susie, a little girl. And then we'd get, various guest stars now and then. I did this for quite some time. I was skeptical. It felt right to me. It felt real. But I was also just skeptical. And I'll tell you the truth, I couldn't prove that it wasn't acting, but if it was, it sure damn was good, and it sure was real wisdom coming through. And there was a definite feeling when each entity would speak that was hard to deny, but I was young and just skeptical of those things. So I did this for quite some time. We became quite a tight group, actually, though the group would shift a bit. And one night when Mary was speaking, she was speaking about the experience of channeling and what Elisa goes through and so on. And she turned to me and pointed to me and said, "You would be very good at this." And, boing. And so we left it at that. There was another person in the group who was basically studying how to be a medium and practicing it, much further along than I. And he offered to help me with it. So he and a couple of others and myself worked on it several times, a number of times. And I have to say the feeling, it was difficult for me to get to do that. First of all, it was very difficult for me to sit and feel all these feelings and feel them build up, but I was still conscious. I was still aware, and I felt like I couldn't allow myself to speak, even though these words were welling up within me, because I thought I would be acting. I thought I would be pretending. I thought I'd be doing improv or something like that, and I was very uptight about doing that. But one night, I just kind of did. As I mentioned, we were sitting on chairs, sitting up straight, feet flat on the floor, thighs parallel to the floor, so that you can almost imagine if your spine in that position continued straight down into the floor like the root of a tree. You have a very solid feeling in the earth. And when I first allowed myself to speak, it was because I could hold it back no longer. I was pouring sweat. I felt like there was electricity going all through my body, and especially coming up through the earth from that imaginary trunk that continues up into my own trunk and out the top of my head. And I started speaking. And as soon as I did, that's when I relaxed. That's when I went into the trance. Trance meaning just a light trance. I'm aware to the sense of what room I'm in and so on, but I didn't remember anything I would say after it was over. So I practiced this. I got better at this. So I didn't have to go through all that drama before I could let an entity speak through me. And as you say, once you practice one area of intuition, all these other areas of intuition expand for you.
Yes.
And they did for me.
So Russell, I'm gonna jump in just now, because as we're getting closer to the end of time, I'm sure we're all listening. I'm listening. I'm fascinated to listen whenever Russell's like telling a story. So I'm sure everybody else is fascinated too. We're gonna have more of this to come, because we have these abilities, and both Russell and I have practiced them and made them strong. I've practiced even outside of before I told anybody. And actually used it. There are people who their major talent is that they have these intuitive abilities, and that's wonderful. That's the way it is. And so you know about them because that's their major talent. Then there are people who are like Russell and I, who we talk about it later because there are other gifts and talents that are coming forth at the time in our life. And so we're going to do more of these segments and have people call in to be able to talk to us and ask us questions about our intuitive side, because we understand this is how you get to know about you. This is how you get the idea is to get information about you. But let me just tell you one thing as we're about to close and wrap up. The best way to have these experiences is for you yourself to have the experience within you. And so this is also about making you stronger intuitively so that you know and can learn how to do things like heal yourself. And I'm Dr. Veronica. I'm co-hosting with Russell. You can find me on drveronica.com.
Thank you for listening to the Wellness Revolution podcast. If you want to hear more on how to bring wellness into your life, visit drveronica.com. See you all next week. Take care.